Adaobi wiped her sweaty palms on her faded wrapper as she adjusted the tray of groundnuts on her head. The scorching sun was unforgiving, but she couldn't afford to rest. Her mother, Ngozi, was at home nursing a fever, and her younger brothers, Uchenna and Ifeanyi, hadn't eaten since morning. "Buy your fresh groundnuts here," Adaobi called out, her voice cracking slightly from the strain of the day. She moved from house to house, her feet aching from walking on the uneven roads. Life had not always been this hard, but everything changed after her father Okonkwo died 6 months ago. Okonkwo had been the pillar of the family, a hard-working farmer who ensured his children never lacked. His sudden death from a mysterious illness left a void that Adaobi, at just 19, was forced to fill. She had given up her dream of becoming a nurse and thrown herself into helping her family survive. "Groundnut girl, come here," a male voice called out from behind. Adaobi turned and saw Emeka, a tall, well-dressed young man leaning against his car. He was new in the village, visiting his grandmother, and his presence had caused quite a stir among the women. Adaobi hesitated. She had heard the whispers about him being from a wealthy family, and she didn't want any trouble, but she needed to sell her groundnuts. "Good afternoon, sir," she said, forcing a smile as she approached him. "How much for everything?" Emeka asked, pointing to her tray. Adaobi blinked in surprise. No one had ever asked to buy all her groundnuts at once. "Everything? It's 3,000 naira, sir," she replied cautiously. Without hesitation, Emeka handed her 4,000 naira and said, "Keep the change." Adaobi was stunned. "Thank you, sir. May God bless you." "I'm Emeka," he said, smiling. "What's your name?" "Adaobi," she replied shyly. From that day, Emeka became a regular sight in her life. He always found excuses to buy groundnuts from her, even when it was clear he didn't need them. Slowly, they began to talk, and Adaobi found herself looking forward to their conversations. One day, Emeka said, "You're too smart to be selling groundnuts. What happened to your education?" Adaobi lowered her gaze. "I had to stop after my father died. There was no money for school fees." Emeka's expression softened. "What if I told you I could help? You deserve a better life, Adaobi." Her heart leapt at his words, but she quickly reminded herself of the harsh reality. People like Emeka didn't associate with girls like her for long. Still, the seed of hope he planted began to grow in her heart. However, not everyone was pleased with their budding friendship. Nena, the village gossip, began spreading malicious rumors. "Adaobi must be using charms to trap that city boy," she told anyone who would listen. When Ngozi heard the rumors, she confronted her daughter. "Adaobi, be careful. Not everyone who smiles at you means well," she warned. Adaobi nodded, but deep down she believed Emeka was different. One evening, Emeka asked her, "Do you trust me, Adaobi?" "Yes," she replied hesitantly. "Then come to the city with me. I'll sponsor your education and help your family." Adaobi's breath caught in her throat. The offer was tempting, but it meant leaving her mother and brothers behind. That night, she couldn't sleep. She thought about her family's struggles, her father's dreams for her, and the chance Emeka was offering. By dawn, her mind was made up. She left a note for her mother, promising to return for them once she was settled. With trembling hands, she climbed into Emeka's car, not knowing that her decision would change her life forever, for better or worse. Adaobi sat quietly in Emeka's car, clutching the small bag that contained all her belongings. Her heart raced as the car sped along the bumpy road leading out of the village. She had never been beyond the borders of her small community, and every turn brought a mix of fear and excitement. Emeka glanced at her and smiled. "You'll love the city, Adaobi. It's a different world, opportunities everywhere." Adaobi nodded, but her mind was restless. Her thoughts lingered on her mother, Ngozi, and her brothers. Would they forgive her for leaving? She had written in the note that she would come back for them, but deep down she wasn't sure when or how. When they finally reached the city, Adaobi's eyes widened in awe. The towering buildings, the endless stream of cars, and the bustling streets were unlike anything she had ever seen. It felt overwhelming, but Emeka reassured her. "We'll start by getting you settled," he said, as he drove into a quiet estate. They stopped in front of a modest but comfortable apartment. "This is where you'll stay," he added. Adaobi couldn't believe it. The apartment was small, but far better than anything she had imagined. Emeka introduced her to Amaka, a friendly woman in her late 20s who lived nearby. "Amaka will help you settle in and show you around," he explained. "Thank you, Emeka," Adaobi said, tears welling up in her eyes. The first few weeks in the city felt like a dream. Emeka enrolled her in a nursing program and ensured she had everything she needed. Adaobi threw herself into her studies, determined to make him and her family proud. But life in the city wasn't as smooth as it seemed. Emeka's visits became less frequent as he got busier with his business. Adaobi started to feel lonely, and her struggles with adapting to city life weighed heavily on her. Amaka tried to cheer her up, but nothing could fill the growing void in her heart. One evening, Adaobi decided to call home. She borrowed Amaka's phone and dialed her mother's number. When Ngozi answered, there was a long pause before she said, "Adaobi, is that you?" "Yes, Mama," Adaobi replied, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry for leaving like that. I just wanted to make things better for us." Ngozi sighed heavily. "We miss you, my daughter. Your brothers keep asking when you'll come home." Tears streamed down Adaobi's face. "Soon, Mama. I promise I'll make you proud." After the call, Adaobi felt a renewed sense of purpose. But just as she started to feel hopeful, life threw her another challenge. One afternoon, while walking back from her classes, Adaobi noticed a group of men standing near her apartment. They looked rough and intimidating. As she approached, one of them stepped forward. "You must be Emeka's girl," he said, his voice cold and menacing. I don't know what you're talking about," Adaobi stammered, fear gripping her. The man smirked. "Tell your boyfriend he owes us money. If he doesn't pay up soon, we'll come for you instead." Before Adaobi could respond, they walked away, leaving her shaken. She ran into the apartment and locked the door, her heart pounding. She tried calling Emeka, but his phone was switched off. That night, as she lay in bed, she realized that the dream Emeka had offered her might come at a cost she wasn't prepared to pay. Adaobi couldn't sleep that night. Her mind raced with thoughts of the men's threats and Emeka's silence. She paced her small apartment, wondering if she had made a mistake trusting him. The city that once seemed full of promise now felt cold and dangerous. By morning, Adaobi decided to confront Emeka. She left him several messages, but there was no response. Determined to find answers, she went to Amaka, who had become like an elder sister to her. "Amaka, something is wrong," Adaobi began, her voice trembling. "Some men came yesterday threatening me because of Emeka. They said he owes them money." Amaka's face darkened. "Adaobi, I've warned you before to be careful. I've heard whispers about Emeka's business dealings, and they're not all clean." Adaobi's heart sank. "What do you mean?" Amaka sighed. "He's involved with some dangerous people. I didn't want to scare you, but it's better you know now. You need to be very careful. If he's in trouble, it could spill over to you." Adaobi felt a wave of panic, but tried to steady herself. "What do I do, Amaka? I can't just sit here and wait for them to come back." "First, stay indoors for a while," Amaka advised. "I'll try to find out more about what's going on. But Adaobi, you need to start thinking about how to protect yourself. If Emeka can't sort this out, you may need to leave the city." Adaobi nodded, though the thought of leaving everything behind terrified her. She had come so far and couldn't imagine returning to her village empty-handed. Later that evening, Emeka finally called. Adaobi picked up immediately, her voice sharp with frustration and fear. "Emeka, where have you been? Some men came here looking for you. They threatened me." There was silence on the other end, before Emeka sighed heavily. "Adaobi, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to get dragged into this. Things have gotten complicated, but I'll fix it, I promise." "How, Emeka?" Adaobi demanded. "I left my family because you said you'd help me. Now I'm in danger because of you." "I know," he said softly. "Just give me some time. Stay indoors and don't talk to anyone. I'll sort it out." But days turned into weeks. and Emeka's promises began to feel hollow. He rarely visited, and when he did, he seemed distracted and nervous. Adaobi noticed that he was constantly looking over his shoulder, as though someone was watching him. Meanwhile, the men's threats didn't stop. They left notes at her door, each one more menacing than the last. Amaka grew increasingly worried and insisted that Adaobi consider moving out. "You can't stay here, Adaobi," Amaka said one night. "This isn't safe anymore. I'll help you find another place, far from here." Adaobi shook her head. "I can't just run, Amaka. I came here to build a future, not to live in fear." Amaka grabbed her hands, her eyes filled with concern. "Sometimes, surviving is more important than fighting. You're young, Adaobi. You have a bright future ahead, but not if you stay tangled in this mess." Despite Amaka's pleas, Adaobi remained hesitant. But one evening, everything changed. Adaobi returned home from class to find her apartment ransacked. Her belongings were scattered everywhere, and a chilling message was scrawled on the wall in red paint. "Time is running out." Trembling, Adaobi packed a small bag with her essentials and ran to Amaka's place. "They broke into my apartment," Adaobi said, her voice shaking. "I can't stay there anymore." Amaka hugged her tightly. "You did the right thing by coming here. We'll figure this out together." As the days passed, Adaobi began to feel like a prisoner in the city. She couldn't go back to the village, but she also couldn't stay in the place she had once thought was her salvation. One night, as she sat in Amaka's living room, the doorbell rang. Amaka went to answer it, and when she returned, her face was pale. "Adaobi, there's someone here to see you," she said. Before Adaobi could respond, a tall man in a black suit stepped into the room. His presence was commanding, and his cold eyes seemed to pierce through her. "Miss Adaobi, I believe we need to have a conversation," he said, his voice calm but threatening. Adaobi's heart raced as she realized that her life was about to change forever. Adaobi stared at the man in the black suit, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. His demeanor exuded power and danger, and for a moment, she was too terrified to speak. "I'm here on behalf of Mr. Emeka," the man began, his voice steady but cold. "He has failed to settle his debts, and unfortunately, you have become collateral damage in this matter." Amaka quickly stepped forward, placing herself slightly in front of Adaobi. "Look, sir, this is unnecessary. Adaobi has nothing to do with whatever Emeka owes you. She's just an innocent young woman trying to make a life for herself." The man's lips curled into a faint, humorless smile. "Innocent or not, she's connected to him, and until he pays what he owes, she remains a part of this equation." Adaobi finally found her voice. "Please, I don't know what Emeka has done. I had no idea about his dealings. I just want to live my life in peace." The man tilted his head, studying her. "Peace is a luxury that people in debt don't get to enjoy. You see, Emeka is running out of time, and if he doesn't come through soon, you may find yourself paying the price for his mistakes." Amaka stepped in again, her voice firm. "That's enough. You've made your point. Now, leave before I call the police." The man chuckled, a dark, unsettling sound. "The police? They don't scare me. But I'll leave for now. Just know, Miss Adaobi, that your time is running out too." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Adaobi sank onto the couch, her hands trembling. "What am I going to do, Amaka? They won't stop. I feel like I'm trapped with no way out." Amaka sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. "We'll figure this out. You're not alone in this, Adaobi. But we need to act fast. First, we have to find Emeka and force him to deal with this mess." Over the next few days, Amaka used her connections to track down Emeka. It wasn't easy. He seemed to be avoiding everyone. But finally, she received a tip that he was hiding out in a dingy hotel on the outskirts of the city. "We're going to see him," Amaka said firmly. Adaobi hesitated. "What if he refuses to help? What if he's already given up?" "Then we'll make him understand," Amaka replied. "This isn't just about him anymore. He dragged you into this and he owes you a way out." The drive to the hotel was tense. Adaobi's mind raced with what she would say to Emeka. Anger, fear, and heartbreak swirled within her, leaving her emotionally drained. When they arrived, the hotel was even worse than they had imagined. Small, poorly lit, and reeking of desperation. Amaka banged on the door of Emeka's room, and after a few moments, he opened it. He looked terrible. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, and his face gaunt. It was clear he hadn't been sleeping. "Adaobi," he said, his voice filled with guilt. "I didn't want you to see me like this." "That's all you have to say?" Adaobi snapped, her fear finally giving way to anger. "Do you know what I've been through because of you? Do you even care?" Emeka lowered his head. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I thought I could handle it, but things spiraled out of control." Amaka stepped forward, her tone icy. "Handle it? You've put her life in danger, Emeka. Those men are ruthless. They came to her home, threatened her, and destroyed everything she worked for. You need to fix this. Now." "I'm trying," Emeka said weakly, "but the money, it's too much. I don't have it." "Then find a way," Adaobi shouted, her voice breaking. "I believed in you, Emeka. I left my family, my home, because you promised me a better life, and now look where I am. I can't even sleep at night because I'm afraid of what might happen." Emeka's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Adaobi. I really am. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Amaka wasn't convinced. "Words mean nothing, Emeka. You need to act, and fast." As they left the hotel, Adaobi felt a flicker of hope, though it was faint. She wanted to believe that Emeka would come through, but deep down, she wasn't sure. The next day, another note arrived at Amaka's door. This time, it wasn't just a threat. It was a warning. "If Emeka doesn't pay up by the end of the week, we'll come for what matters most to him." Adaobi's heart sank. She knew exactly what they meant. The note left Adaobi trembling. Every word echoed in her mind, a reminder of the danger she faced. Amaka, however, refused to let fear win. "We have 3 days to solve this," Amaka declared, pacing the room. "If Emeka can't find the money, we need another plan." Adaobi nodded, though her mind was blank. "But what can we do, Amaka? These men are serious. What could possibly convince them to stop?" "We'll have to outsmart them," Amaka replied. "But first, let's focus on Emeka. He needs to step up and face them. He's the only one who can." They returned to Emeka's hideout, this time with a firmer resolve. Emeka was still in the same disheveled state, but his eyes carried a flicker of determination. "I've made a decision," Emeka said before they could speak. "I know where the money is." Adaobi and Amaka exchanged a surprised glance. "Where?" Amaka demanded. Emeka hesitated. It's with an old associate. I gave it to him months ago, hoping he'd invest it. But when things went south, I was too ashamed to ask for it back. I thought I could find another way." "Then what are we waiting for?" Amaka snapped. "Let's go get it." The trio made their way to the associate's home, a large compound in a wealthier part of the city. The man, Mr. Akin, was a middle-aged businessman with a commanding presence. "Adaobi, Amaka, this is Mr. Akin," Emeka said nervously. I need the money back." Mr. Akin's expression turned serious. "You mean the money you gave me to hold?" "Yes," Emeka replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need it. Now." Mr. Akin leaned back in his chair, his gaze shifting to Adaobi. "And who is this young woman?" "She's the reason I'm here," Emeka admitted. "She's in danger because of me. Please, I beg you, help me save her." There was a long pause before Mr. Akin finally sighed. "Emeka, I've always seen potential in you, but you've made too many reckless decisions. However, for her sake, I'll return the money. But this is the last time I'll bail you out." Relief washed over Adaobi, but it was short-lived. "How soon can we get it?" she asked. "By tomorrow evening," Mr. Akin replied. The next 24 hours felt like an eternity. Adaobi and Amaka stayed up, strategizing and praying that this would be the end of their nightmare. The next evening, they returned to Mr. Akin's home, and true to his word, he handed Emeka the money. It was enough to clear the debt, with a little extra left over. "Now go and settle this," Mr. Aiken warned, "and don't ever come back with such problems again." Emeka thanked him profusely before they hurried to meet the debt collectors. The confrontation was tense, but when the money was handed over, the men finally relented. "You're lucky this time," their leader growled. "But remember, if we ever cross paths again, there won't be a second chance." As they drove home, the weight on Adaobi's chest began to lift. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe again. But the experience had changed her. Sitting beside Amaka, she realized that she couldn't continue her life with Emeka. His decisions had nearly cost her everything. "Amaka," she said softly, "I've made up my mind. I need to go back home, back to my family. I need to start over." Amaka smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "That's the best decision you could make, Adaobi. You've been through so much. It's time to find your happiness again." Emeka overheard and looked at Adaobi, guilt and regret etched on his face. "I understand, Adaobi. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you find peace. I'm truly sorry." Adaobi nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. She had loved Emeka, but it was time to put herself first. Life will throw challenges your way, but just like Adaobi, you have the strength to rise above them. Forgive, let go, and focus on rebuilding your life. Remember, your pain is not the end. It's the beginning of your breakthrough. If this story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more motivational and life-changing stories. Share this with someone who needs a reminder to keep pushing forward. Let's grow together. Once again, thanks for watching.